a ounce or whatever. Um, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, so is it true that the whole court is a business and somebody is running it like a gas station and there's something called CUSIP that insures it?
I don't know about COSA, but as far as the court being a business, that's absolutely true. It's not necessarily ran like a gas station, and the court is a business. So whenever you go to like a state court, and any state court over here in the United States is an administrative court. So they have an administrative side, and then they actually have a side for law. So I've taken people down to the court, and it's like the court will take credit cards, like if you're paying a speeding ticket, a fine to the state, this, that, and the other. If it's some type of administrative process, when you're actually filing something in law, they can't take a credit card, they have to take cash. So, and that's one of the ways that you know the differences between the sides is like they cannot take credit for anything that's in law.
Yeah, and
But
you're far more likely to find justice in a gas station.
Oh my god. Oh.
does the judge make money if he convicted me? Like, does it like the more convictions, the more money he makes? Because if that's the case, he has like a vested interest in convicting people.
Well, I mean, they definitely have vested interests. Okay, so as far as that stuff going into, like, are you talking about the bonds that they put on cases, and people bonding out, and that's why they don't wish to discharge cases? They just dismiss it because they're not going to discharge it before the bonds matured.
So I can make my case to be discharged instead of be dismissed.
Well, I mean, that's, yeah, in law, it should be discharged and not dismissed. If it's dismissed, they can bring it back. That's why, like, when they say dismissed without prejudice, they can come back and charge you again, is because they just dismissed it, and they didn't dismiss it by prejudging it with some sort of fact. They dismissed it because, the prosecuting party didn't have their facts together or their evidence together well enough to prosecute. So they're basically dismissing it, and then they'll bring it back at some later date if they get the facts or evidence together enough to prosecute. But when it's
That
discharged, they can't recharge it again, not for the same incident or the same occurrence.
And how do I make them discharge it if I get in trouble someday?
You can't make them discharge it. You can't make any man or woman do anything. But honestly, it's like, if they dismiss it, they should discharge it. If they have a failure to prosecute, if they have a pretended offense, like, some type of possession of a substance, or, just whatever pretended offense they come up with. And they got a whole lot of pretended offenses. And one of the big problems that we face today is that they keep on prosecuting and charging pretended offenses and allowing um, real offenses like real crimes, real murders, real rapes, real assaults to just go unprosecuted, or to let the perpetrator off with an incredibly sweet plea deal, like Jeffrey Epstein or James Sapp up in North Carolina, and they don't get prosecuted. And that's why most of the people sitting in prison haven't even committed a violent crime.
Wow, that's completely out of the hands. I mean, so I can buy my way out of a case.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually still tell people this. Is it illegal for you to go and offer a judge $10,000 and to tell him to throw out your case when he sees you?
I think so.
Yeah, it's called bribery, right? Now,
Yeah.
is it illegal for you to go and give an attorney $10,000, tell him to go give it to the judge, and tell him to tell the judge to throw it out when he sees you?
Um, it should be legal.
It
I
should
think
be
it's legal.
legal, but the God's the honest truth, especially if you're charged with something criminal, and because your conversations with your attorney are confidential, not only is it not illegal, but if you go to an attorney and you try doing that, then by law and by their oath of office, they actually have to give you the best legal advice that they can. So they can tell you, well, that's probably not going to work out so well. I know this guy, and bribery is probably not going to work, or they can just say, did you have anything else to talk about today? And you just leave with empty pockets. I don't know what happens.
Yeah, so you just can't do it directly.
Yeah. Everybody in the game has to get played. You got to pay to play. And even once you get to a certain level, like look at Pablo Escobar, right? I mean, once he got to a certain level and he was creating enough news, they still went and got him anyways. So once you get to a certain point, a certain level, at some point, if they wish to go and get you, they're just going to go and get you. And there's no way of buying your way out of it.
So the safest route is just to not have any joinders or any like tacit agreements with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, like for any average individual, like if you're actually in the business of carrying on a criminal enterprise that could get you more than 10 years in prison, I would say the best, safest way to be protected is to just not do that enterprise.
If it's an LLC, I think like I don't get in trouble. Is that real or is like?
Well, if it's an LLC, it doesn't necessarily mean so an LLC is like a limited liability corporation. And this is by no means any legal advice, but it's a limited liability corporation. So, basically before they can come after your corporate fiction, they have to go after the corporate fiction that you created with the LLC. But if you talk to people who actually own LLCs, and they'll, attorneys will try and talk you into creating them because, of course, it creates money for them. If your LLC gets sued, then you have to have an attorney because you don't have a license to practice law to represent the LLC. Okay. Which if you just were doing business without an LLC or without any type of corporate papers, then like they would have to sue you. So if the lawsuit was frivolous, you could go in there and say, "Hey, this is frivolous," and they'd have to throw it out. It also, like an LLC, pays accountants because doing the taxes and keeping up with the books is kind of extensive work on that. So there are a lot of reasons why they kind of perpetrate this myth that you should have an LLC. But in all actuality, if you go after an LLC, you're typically going after the owner and certain corporate officers within that LLC as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
because the LLC can't actually be responsible for anything. Like, let me just put it to you this way. If you slipped and fell in a Walmart, okay, the LLC did not make that floor slippery and not put a sign up. Like an employee did that, and then the employee answers to a manager, and the manager answers to the district manager, and so on until you get to a CEO.
Isn't an employee from Walmart?
No, actually, an employee is from the government. Like employee literally means somebody who works for an individual forever. And that's the government. You're working for the government forever when you're an employee and you're using the social security number or the social security identification or the social insurance number. And that's why you keep on working for the government. That's why you're paying them taxes. That's why it's all done through that social security, social insurance number.
So
So-
ever since I've been an employee of whoever it was or whatever it was, I've always been working for the government.
You've been paying them taxes out of that check, right?
No.
Okay.
Well, I used to.
Then I would say you're not an employee anymore. But if you're
Oh.
paying taxes, you're an employee of the government.
Period.
Okay. Would it make sense to not pay taxes anymore, even if you work?
Well, if you have like a corporate job, like let's just say you're a manager at a Walmart, and let's just say you go to the Walmart and fill out all of the paperwork to where they can't take the taxes out right off the bat. They have an administrative process that they came up with about 3 years ago. And they'll just do that administrative process, and the IRS will handle your employer directly, and your employer will let you go before telling the government no. So I would say in the past, like 2.5 years, I've never seen somebody be employed by a corporate office like Walmart and not employed by, some type of handshake deal that has been able to get away with not paying taxes. when the IRS starts this administrative process.
Yeah, but can a PMA tell the IRS to go kick rocks?
What's a PMA?
It's a form of a company called Private Membership Association, where like they're not subject to statutes.
Can a
You never heard
private
of it?
membership association tell the government to go kick
Oh,
rocks? Well, who's the private
Associations.
membership association registered with?
Well, I heard that somewhere that it's not registered. I think it's just like private members gathering together and then forming this entity.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, but if it's a private membership association, who is it registered with? And as soon as it's registered, then yeah, they have jurisdiction over it. So, like, down here in South Carolina, we had really, really strict blue laws. Okay. So people would get together, make a private membership association so that they could sell alcohol on Sundays. Okay.
Okay.
And that was a lot different back then than it is today. Now today that they've actually gone back to even if you have a private club more or less, yeah, there are certain things that the legislatures have agreed with themselves and said that they can write statutes over it. And yes, like if the state legislature writes the statutes, then somebody's going to go out and enforce them.
So it's still subject to it.
Well, I mean, I would say that you're subject to things that are being forced upon you. So if you have an army called the Policy Enforcement Agency, the police department, the sheriff's office, whatever you wish to call it, that's coming and physically and like forcing upon you that you have to follow these policies, then I would say that basically you're subject to it, right?
But what if I like want to do business? Like, let's say I want to start, a gas station or a snack shop or anything, but I don't want to be subject. Like, as long as I don't hurt anybody, that should be the only law on my so-called company.
Yeah, but with the way that society's ran right now, and I mean, I agree with you, okay? Like 100%. I think it's really kind of BS when they started making like taxi drivers get, special permits and licenses, and people couldn't just go and write taxi on the side of their car and start driving around. And the thing is that when people don't stand up for their freedoms, when people don't stand up for their rights, they end up losing them. And kind of at the beginning of this call, well, not necessarily at the beginning, but before we started unmuting people, I was talking about how your rights are your property, and you can buy, sell, trade them just like you
Yeah,
could any other
I
property.
heard it. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you have sold your rights to such an extent to have certain privileges from the government and to have the government take care of you for certain things, whenever a government has taken a right, I've never seen them give it back for
Yeah.
any reason besides force from the public, besides public force. A good example of this, if you're looking at the United States, is the right to go in and swear out a warrant against a criminal, even if that criminal is wearing a badge. And of course, badge wearers that commit criminal acts get away with it all of the time. But last year, at the beginning of the summer, they committed a criminal act of killing a man on the side of the road, and the entire country erupted into violence in a lot of ways from sea to sea. And so the policy was, okay, we'll go ahead and swear out a warrant against him, but they didn't give the right back. They just said, okay, we'll uphold this right this one time. Calm down, everybody. Why are y'all getting out of line?
Yeah, that wasn't justice. That was self-preservation. They knew if they didn't set some kind of illusion of justice, then they were probably next to be burnt down. So they didn't actually give the power back. They just pretended that your desires aligned. They pretended they wanted it to happen as much as you did, as far as the people went.